President Kamala Harris has been the administration's point person on this ever since Roe versus Wade was overturned 2 years ago, and she vows to restore it if elected. In the Gambia, West Africa, a different struggle over women and the right to their own bodies is playing out. A bill seeking to reverse the 2015 ban on female genital mutilation was recently rejected by the nation's parliament, thanks to intensive lobbying and campaigning from human rights activists. Nearly 75% of Gambian women between the ages of 15 and 49 have endured this brutal practice, including our next guest, Jaha Dukure. She is the founder of Safe Hands for Girls, an NGO supporting survivors, and she's a UN Women Ambassador for Africa. She's joining me live now from New York. Jaha Dukure, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
I mean, first and foremost, we need to celebrate what you all managed to make happen in your home country, Gambia. And that is not allowing the forces of whatever culture to overturn this ban on FGM. How difficult was that? What did you have to do to convince Parliament and the people that these rights should not be overturned?
I mean, I have dedicated most of my adult life working on the issue of FGM as a survivor and someone who not only comes from the Gambia, but I come from a tribe that practices female genital mutilation 100% of the time. And I feel to bring change into our communities is important that women like me who have the lived experiences, as well as know how to deal with members of our community from our National Assembly members. And for us, we had to work with members of parliament in the Gambia. One key person was our Deputy Speaker, Mr. Sili Njai, who helped us lobby his colleagues. But not only that, we had to work with religious leaders. We had to get survivors to come out and share their story. And we had to mobilize across the country because this was an issue that was highly politicized. And, you know, to think that in 2024, we're discussing whether to cut parts of a woman's genital is still something that I can't believe that I found myself in this fight nearly 12 years after I founded my organization. So when I was 1 week old in my tribe in the Gambia, you know, we are one of the only tribes that practice FGM when a girl is so young. So when I was 1 week old, I went through FGM, but I also went through the type of FGM where the vagina is usually sealed, so that way they can prevent you from having sex until you get married. And I didn't know that I went through FGM because obviously at that age, I don't remember the experience. But when I got married at 15, it was when I found out that I had actually been subjected to FGM because my marriage couldn't be consummated until the seal was taken off.
Sorry, you got married at how old?
I was 15 years old when I got married.
To who? Was this a marriage of choice?
No, it wasn't a marriage of choice. Here in New York, actually, my mother died when I was 14, and then I was brought to New York to marry a guy that was much older than me, someone that was selected by my family. It wasn't a marriage that I wanted. And I think that's what frustrates me about the work that we are doing in the Gambia. A lot of times they claim that, you know, we are influenced by the West and that everything that we say, it's not true. When, you know, there's evidence that this is something, like I remember the doctor that took off the seal when I was 15 years old here in New York City. I have the pictures of my wedding day.
We just showed them, yes.
Exactly. So it's, yeah.
Can you tell us what is the origin of this practice? Because, you know, lots of well-meaning humanitarians call it cultural heritage. Others say it's a religious practice. What is it? Why does it happen? Because there are a lot of stakeholders, including some of the women who perform it. It's a source of income for them.
Absolutely. I mean, being a source of income is why we insist on providing alternative livelihoods to women. But culture, slavery used to be a culture. But as human beings with morality, we know that it's wrong. And because of that, we decided to abolish it. Foot binding used to be a culture in China. I agree, female genital mutilation is cultural, but in Gambia and places like Somalia, people claim that it's a religious practice when in fact it's not. When you look at the practice of female genital mutilation, it happens in Africa, it happens in Asia, and it happens in parts of the Middle East. But in predominantly Muslim countries like the Gambia, where some religious leaders, I would say extreme religious leaders, claim that this is a religious practice, but then you look at other places like the UAE, for instance, Qatar, and there's a lot of North African countries where female genital mutilation is not a thing. So I would say in the places where it is practiced, it is a cultural practice that has been passed down for generations.
Mm. Look, you talked about North Africa. CNN did an amazing report, actually 30 years ago now, of a young girl who this was happening to, and CNN had access. And we're going to show you and air just a little piece of it, which was after the brutal cutting and her reaction afterwards. She was about 10 years old, this little girl.
Daddy, Daddy, screams Negla. There is a sin upon all of you. Negla's family fears that without circumcision, she'll become sexually promiscuous. It's not known why Egyptians traditionally circumcise their daughters. The family believes it's part of Islam, but religious scholars disagree. It's almost unheard of in other Islamic countries. I want you to know, Daddy, that I didn't want to be circumcised, and you did it to me. Don't be a brat, your grandmother calls. It's over, says her father. Be brave, Negla. Be brave.
Gosh, I mean, to this day, it's hard to watch that. And it became illegal in Egypt, where that took place in 2008. And at the time, FGM there made up a quarter of all the world's cases. But there's since been a sharp downturn, some progress there. Cases down almost 30% since then, 30 years ago. But she was blaming her parents. Did you have that situation? Were you able to tell your parents or your father, as she did, that this was not something you wanted?
But I did not have
afterwards.
That
I mean,
choice.
yeah,
a lot
you
of
were 1 week old. But, yeah.
Exactly. I mean, as an adult, I did have that conversation with my dad, but Egypt actually played a huge role in us maintaining the ban in the Gambia. The Civil Society Coalition in the Gambia that I worked with, we took our National Assembly members to Egypt so that way they can learn from the Egypt experience. But a lot of girls globally, 230 million girls, are living with the practice of female genital mutilation. Many of them do not get a choice in whether this happens to them or not, and they never get an apology. And constantly living with people diminishing their pain and saying that this is something that should be acceptable when in fact it's not.
Interestingly, I read that your own father is a prominent imam, and you managed to convince him against FGM. Is that what it's going to take,
yes.
Really?
Well, my dad loves me, but it's going to take women like us from the communities. You cannot import solutions into a community and accept change. It's important that you work with people like us who can stand up and say that because we have experienced this, we know exactly what it feels like, and we are urging and pleading with our communities. And we have to, do our advocacy in a very respectful manner because we're dealing with a very culturally sensitive issue. So a lot of times I do have some empathy, especially for the women who are survivors who are saying that, they will continue FGM because they're also victims of this practice. And I think education is critical in everything that we do.